therapy. All right. So now we're going to talk about narrative therapy. In your notes, I included a very rough draft of a journal article that I had a previous student, and she was really interested in Jung and narrative therapy. And I thought that both Jung and narrative therapy went together pretty well with myth, metaphor, archetype, all of that. And so we came up with this rough draft, but I think it needs rewritten and some needs added to it. But you can still read it. The information is accurate. I just don't think it's good enough to be published right now. I think it needs some changes. Not a lot of people apply Jung to narrative therapy or vice versa. But I think that narrative therapy gets a lot of its ideas from Jungian concepts, especially the application of myth, metaphor, and archetype. So let's talk about some of Jung's concepts, and then we'll talk about narrative therapy, which is a very contemporary therapy. So Jung was born to a family, and his father was a Reformed minister, and of course they were living in Europe, and they did move around Europe, but I know that at some point they were in Switzerland and a few other places. His mother was the daughter of a minister, so he got a lot of religion early on. But at one point in his life, he thought maybe he would pursue that, but he ended up in a little less orthodox spiritual place, and he wanted to study all religions, and I think he had a more spiritual side than religious side. And one of the reasons why he wanted to study world religions is because of the history of stories in each religion. And then he got into social anthropology and realized that, hey, there's a long history of cultural stories, not just religious stories. Now, here's the interesting thing. One of the things that he noticed was that cultures that never had any contact with each other, so for instance, the Aboriginal people native to Australia never had contact with North American Native Americans. They're two separate continents, and you can't even say that Europeans visited them both. It just, they were very separate. And yet, themes and myths and metaphors and archetypes. So let's talk about, so a myth, we often think a myth is not true, but there may be aspects of a mythic story that are true, but it's an ancient story and carried on by the oral tradition, by word of mouth. But what he realized is that each of these stories, cultures, every culture has stories like this, and these stories carried meaning with them. They had a message with them. And it might be a message about how to live life, or how to live a moral existence, or the value of sacrifice. And so each story also had a metaphor for whoever was listening to the story. It had a message for contemporary people who heard the story. It was basically some meaning that they could apply to their current life. And an archetype is basically concepts within the themes that repeat themselves in every culture, whether those cultures were isolated or not. So an archetypal figure might be a certain type of hero. And the interesting thing is that even though people in Australia never met people in North America, and they never met people in Africa, and they never met people in Europe, the stories had very similar themes. So the characters' names might be different. The journeys they went on might have gone to different places. They might have fought different monsters, but the message was the same. The type of hero that they were enacting and embodying was the same. And, I think that another interesting thing, Jung found that these heroes not only had to overcome external obstacles and struggles in order to succeed on their journey, their life journey, but they also had to overcome some internal struggle. And so when me and my children watch Disney movies, like if you've seen Moana, and after she gets you would think that what's the male hero's name? Anybody? Come on, Moana. All right, Maui. Maui is his name. Okay, so once she gets the giant fish hook back to Maui, and she goes through all these quests, and she's ready to return the heart of the ocean, and he leaves her. He doesn't think it can be done, and she's left alone on this raft. And my kids yell out, "It's her moment of doubt." And I think every human being goes through that. Every human being has a moment of self-doubt. Am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right track for my life? Am I making the right choices for me? Maybe I can't succeed at this. Maybe I'm not good enough, whatever that means. So whatever it is, whether we're entering into a career or an education or a relationship, we all have that moment of internal doubt that we have to overcome in order to succeed on the outside in the world, in our life. So as we watch the hero go along this journey, we place ourselves in that position, and the hero learns about themselves. And as we read the story, we apply what the hero learns, and we learn about ourselves as well. We apply it to our own lives. So then after he applied this to psychology and our psychological journey as we grow, other people read Jung's theory. And Joseph Campbell applied it primarily to social anthropology, and he wrote a famous book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And he talks about how this plays out in all different cultures and the different kinds of heroes. And they even have special roles for sidekicks. Sometimes the sidekick is the real hero. And then, and we see it playing out in modern books and modern movies, and like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and Harry Potter and all the Disney movies, the newer ones, where the women are independent and don't need to be rescued by some guy. And and then another person, Paul Ricoeur, he applied it to religious literature. And he applied all of these theories to religious criticism. And then a man named Northrop Frye applied it to novels, basically, to English literature. But it could be applied not only to English literature. He just happened to apply it to English literature, especially things like Shakespeare and Milton. But we can apply it to modern novels. And these themes keep coming up. And it's only the details that are different. And Jung would call this, that he would say that we're all part of this collective unconscious. Humanity shares in certain themes and myths and metaphors and archetypes because we're all on a human journey together. So, from an existential perspective, I would say we are on a journey. And we learn from our mistakes, and we learn from our successes. We learn from the struggle. And it's an internal journey just as much as it is an external journey that human beings travel. All right. So that kind of takes us to present day. And narrative therapy draws upon these concepts, although they never admit it. And think about it this way. The best way I can describe it is to tell you how I apply it to one of my clients. You can apply narrative therapy to any client because any client will come in and you say, well, what brought you to therapy? And eventually I say, I'd like to hear your story. Every human being has a story to share, and I want to hear their story. And then they share their story, and aspects of their belief about their own story may be accurate, or they may be a little biased. So let me give you an example. So 12-year-old girl came to therapy. Father brought her to therapy. The father, his first wife passed away from cancer. And it was just him and his daughter for a long time. But then the father met another woman and they got married, and he wanted them to be a happy family. But to the young girl, she did not like this stepmother. And she thought she was a horrible stepmother. And when I asked her her story, she told me about all the chores and all the horrible things she would make her do. and how everything was unfair. And, I realized that I felt everything was unfair that I was asked to do when I was 12 as well. But this had the added addition of this new person in her and her father's life, who she thought might be trying to replace her mother who had passed away. And so I asked her, I said, are there any stories that either you've read or maybe you've seen a movie that your story that you shared with me reminds you of? And of course, she said Cinderella. And I always had I give them a choice. They could write music, they could write poetry, they could write out the story, they could make a comic book. She chose to make a comic book. I have all these photocopied sheets of blank comic book paper that has all different squares on them and rectangles. And so they can kind of fill it in with comics and add words to it. And I said, I don't want you to recreate Cinderella, but I want you to think about that metaphor of Cinderella and how that story matches your life in many ways. And I want you to draw your story as if you were telling a story like Cinderella, but it's you're the main character. And she did. And of course, we talked about all of the different things that the evil stepmother made her do, like clean her room, like eat things she didn't like that might have been healthy for her, like not go on a date because she's 12. And, how this was grossly unfair. But we talked about, I let her pick one thing that she thought she had a little bit of control over how she would respond that might change the situation, something that wouldn't be too crazy, that she thought she might be able to live with. And we talked about, well, do you feel better when your room's clean? And she said, of course, everything's organized. She's happy to come home to a clean room. And even though it's a hassle cleaning it. And I said, well, do you think you could clean it for yourself? And she said, yes. And I said, well, that's something you have control over. You can make a choice to do that. But let's just see if it makes a difference. Let's see if you get a different reaction from your stepmother if you follow through with this. Now, it might not be drastic. It might not change everything, but it may be one positive reaction that you can build on. And of course, it did get a positive reaction when she showed her clean room. She got very positive and enthusiastic response. So I said, okay, let's start a new story, a new narrative. Only this one, I'd like to make as positive as possible. So it sounds like this was a positive event. So let's draw that as chapter 1. And she made that chapter 1 in her new comic book. And I said, well, since now you feel empowered and you feel pretty good about the result, not only the result from your stepmother, but you feel good about living in a clean room. Is this something you'd like to continue? And she said, well, I might not be perfect, but I do like a clean room. I will continue this chore. So great. So then we picked something else. And of course, as time goes on, stepmother saw that she was making an attempt. That brought down the tenseness and stress in the household. She kept getting positive responses, which acted as a reinforcement. And eventually we went through a lot of different things. There were some stuck points. There were some things that she still wanted to do that she did not have control over, like going on a date because she was too young. But there were compromises, like maybe she's old enough now to go to a slumber party with one of her girlfriends. And so she, there are such things as compromises. And that's a positive result. And if she's able to abide by the rules in a mature way, then the adults in her life will see her as being older and more responsible. But of course, if things go a little crazy, they may not see you as a mature young adult. So that's all in her control to make good choices. And of course, it took a long time to do this. I mean, this took months and months and months. And then I let them keep both a negative story, and I let them keep their positive journey, their story as well. And on the last session, we compare the two and we talk about the positive changes in their lives and how they can apply this to other situations, not just this story, but stories with teachers and friends and other people in their lives as well. So that's just one narrative, but it can be applied to almost any type of story. It can be applied to grief and loss. It can be applied to a sense of unfairness in one's life. There's so many different metaphors out there. The only thing I think it does not work well with, I mean, it works. It's just a kind of different way you have to go about it, is sometimes things happen in people's lives and they don't have control over it. Sometimes pretty bad things happen in people's lives and they don't have a choice about that. The only choice they have is how to respond to that event. So we have to focus, we have to process the negative event, but we also have to talk about how to respond to this event, because that's the only thing they can control now. We can't change that negative thing that happened in their life, but we can change how we choose to respond to that. And that might result in more positive feelings in the future. And it might take a long time. It might not be a quick fix. Those things are a little harder to deal with in narrative therapy. You can do it, but it's a little more complicated. All right. Questions about narrative therapy or ideas or anything at all you'd like to talk about with narrative therapy or Jung? You can incorporate a lot of expressive arts therapy in it, which I like. A lot of creativity. It works well with all ages. All right. I'm going to stop the recording.